Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's second episode of Spilling Tea. We are actually going to descend into a world that I have threatened repeatedly to take you all down and have been too tired to do, but thankfully you've got me on vacation, so guess what's going to be happening while we're on vacation? We are going to be taking you inside the debate in regards to the sheltered workshops when it comes to people with neurodevelopmental disabilities and other disabilities as well. Now, usually we go through the disclaimers, but for these videos, it's going to be real short and sweet. So everything that we're going to go over in regards to the sheltered workshop, along with the other links that we always include, you're going to find right there in the description box. I am going to go ahead and remark, as always, that this channel is marked not for children for a reason. We do occasionally use profanities and sometimes do dark subjects. So, obviously, if your child is 16 and under and they're watching this, parental supervision, all right? Okay, so this is coming from last year from the Missouri Independent. It's going to go into the debate. Now, probably tomorrow, we're going to start going over the history in regards to the sheltered workshops and the laws that are over 81 years old. But we're going to start with just jumping straight into the debate, and then we're going to build context for you, okay? All right, this is coming from the Missouri Independent. It's called Sheltered Workshop or Community Jobs. Missouri debates disabled adults in the workforce. This came from last year, early, like February. Now, to give you a little bit of background, just a little bit, we've been fighting the sheltered workshops out here, well, longer than I've been fighting the JRC. This debate actually got started mid to late 90s. And I just kind of jumped into it. I actually got into this fight before the JRC. I joined this particular fight about around circa 2006 when I joined the Southwest PAC. The Southwest PAC is a committee that helps make the decisions on how state funds are spent on the various projects and programs that assist people with neurodevelopmental disabilities. I was on there as a constituent representative. There was a learning curve, folks, and I just got almost clubbed to death with it. But I did learn after doing a crash course. But let's get into it, shall we? Missouri's first sheltered workshop shifted focus to support disabled employees in the traditional workforce. 5 years later, here's a look at the lasting effects. Now, I'm going to stop that here because the sheltered workshops have actually been around a lot longer than that. In fact, many of my fellows that lived in the assisted living program that I was in straight out of high school were employed, in majority, by a sheltered workshop. So I don't know where you're all getting your numbers here, but you need to do a little bit more research into the topic. In fact, many of the areas that have job programs, in particular Easter Seals, who runs the sheltered workshop out in Nixta, have been here forever, literally forever. But let's get into it, shall we? Okay, and I do want to mention it was originally published by the Kansas City Beacon. Robert Petrie takes pride in his job. The 38-year-old started working at Walmart cart attendant in Sedalia, Missouri nearly 2 years ago. He made the move when he said his old job with McDonald's wasn't challenging enough anymore, the same reason he decided to move on from the job he held before that. What I like about Robert is he's a self-advocate, said Kim Anderson, Director of Employment Services for the Center for Human Services in Sedalia, which is 90 miles southeast of Kansas City. He was like, I've had my first job, I'm ready to move forward. Petrie has developmental disabilities. Though he has held jobs in his community for more than 5 years, his time with Anderson goes back to his working days in CHS, sheltered workshops. Government-subsidized facilities where people with disabilities can work in controlled environments with accommodations, support from staff and supervisors. This is what they use as selling points, folks. They will hammer you in the head with them. They always slam you with accommodations and support for staff that you're not going to have in the traditional workplace. I see that, and I raise you something, and I want you to hear me on this. We have other job programs, like the one that Robert is a part of now, that assists you in learning the job, even allowing job coaches to be present to help you learn that job. There is reasonable accommodations and support that is mandatory due to state and federal law in these jobs for people with disabilities. I noticed because at every single job I have ever worked since the time I was 16 years old, I have always done what we call full disclosure. Now, full disclosure is its own subject, and it is very much a double-edged sword. But the reason why I do that is that there are protections that are put in place as soon as you put that in. That after you put that in and you give the appropriate paperwork, there are now responsibilities that your job has to see to in regards to you. But let's get into it, shall we? That's an entirely different subject. Sheltered workshops also have governmental permission to pay workers less than minimum wage to help offset the costs to employers for purported lower productivity levels of employees with disabilities. This is the thing that kind of really gets my goat here. They always say that it's lower productivity. Efficiency, right? Efficiency, 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 efficiency. It's why so many of us are looked at so lowly. Here's the thing, though. These workshops are putting together things for gift baskets and candy bars at a remarkable rate. My question is, if they're still doing the job, why are they not getting paid accordingly? If they are still hitting those marks, in spite of we being slower than the average person, are they not getting paid the correct rate for it? But let's move on, shall we? Petrie, for example, worked in CHS workshops for 14 years, earning a piece rate each time he helped make a U.S. Navy apron, completed a welding task, or finished a host of other assignments. Welding. Do you know how much welding pays? I can tell you out here in Missouri, some of the highest paying positions are from welders. And he's getting paid pennies on the dollar. While he said he doesn't remember his exact pay rate, state officials report most sheltered workshop employees are paid less than a minimum wage, with some earning as low as $1 per hour. Then in 2016, CHS helped him enter into the traditional workforce. This is one of the main arguments out here, that they're going to prepare you for the workforce. But again, folks, I've worked in this field, and I can tell you from personal experience, there are real transition services out here that can prepare you for the workforce. They start freshman year, folks, freshman year of high school. They get you involved in volunteer programs like out in the hospital, your soup kitchens, and various places out in the community to help you build job skills. I know this because I participated. Okay? It's not the argument y'all think it is. Now let's move forward, shall we? Within a few years, the group ended both its sheltered workshop programs, shifting its employment focus to helping adults with disabilities find and keep jobs in their communities, earning at least minimum wage. This is known as supporting competitive integrated employment. This is something that was kind of my baby when I was working for the state early 2000s. I was pushing for integrated employment. And out of that became the development for the pilot program out here in regards to getting people specifically with autism into the job force because although, yes, I did work with every disability, as far as job programs for people like me, the lack was massive. The misunderstanding was massive. How uneducated the employers are out here when it comes to their autistic employees was, at least at the time, huge, huge. I can't ever overestimate that. But let's move on here. The story of Petrie and the dozens of others who have transitioned from sheltered workshops to outside employment is emblematic of the ongoing national debate about the role of disabled adults in the modern workforce. Although sub-minimum wages and shelter workshops were seen as innovative solutions for the disabled community when they were first made legal in the 1930s, today they are highly controversial, and for a huge reason, folks, because even with these sheltered workshop jobs and with our benefits, I can tell you, as someone who's lived that life, that it keeps you well cemented beneath the poverty line. What makes it worse, especially these days, is what is the programs that get the most money removed out of them every year. Special education, disability job programs, disability programs in general, and Social Security, Medicaid. Every year. Every year. In fact, that was why I was so much on Eric Greitens' hindquarters back in the day, because he removed several $1,000,000 from these programs, and I had a bone to pick about that. You can't live on what you make from the sheltered workshops. And if anybody thinks that we're making a great living on disabilities, nah, no, Karen. We're barely able to stay in our homes. Barely. And that's even with Section 8 help. But let's move on. Many advocates say keeping disabled employees segregated in workshops is discriminatory, because it is. They argue that most adults with disabilities could and should succeed in typical jobs that pay minimum wage or higher with proper support, such as transportation to and from work, or a temporary on-site job coach to help the employee learn the ropes. Exactly. In fact, as much as I hate this city, the reason why I live in it has a large part to do with transportation. Many of us disabled people are what I like to call transportation challenged, right? Getting to the doctors, just getting to a drugstore because I'm out of ibuprofen is actually quite a feat of engineering, okay? And it's literally something that can take up the entirety of my whole day, which is why it takes so much planning. Fun, right? But it did get me from point A to point B, particularly when I was out working one of those jobs out there as opposed to working from my home, which is infinitely more helpful. It's not for everyone, though. Good God, is it not for everyone? Send help. Others view it as a cautionary tale of how overemphasis on competitive employment forces a one-size-fits-all approach on a population with diverse needs. Here we go again. That would be the Karens, folks. These are the people who have screamed in my face that I don't understand, I'm not like their child. Again, if I had $1 for every time. What they don't seem to understand is they're not their kid either. In fact, I am more like their child than they will ever be. They can't comprehend nor understand in their heads what it's like to live with that kind of wage. What it is like, how it makes me feel as a human being to know that my government and the people around me expect me to live under the poverty line. Not just do that, but to be grateful for it. And smile and be happy because they're providing everything for me. They don't live in the reality, folks. Let me tell you, as someone who is forced to live that life, when you are literally making $675 a month and you are expected to cover rent, utilities, medical costs, transportation costs, it's not very realistic, is it? No, it's not. It's really not. But they're going to be like, but what's good for you might not be good for my child. True. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. All of our needs are very different. I am well aware that there are others out there who have far more needs that need to be met than mine. I can comprehend this. What I can't comprehend is your kid who has all these needs is still performing at a satisfactory rate the same kind of work that your average high school student working in fast food does. So why are they being paid less for similar work? Your argument falls flat when it comes to that. Do I believe in integrated employment? Absolutely. 100% yes. Do I believe we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater? This might get me in trouble with some of my fellow advocates. I do see sheltered workshops, if they would pay at least minimum wage, as something that might be useful as far as a transition between high school into the workforce. I say this because helping prepare, particularly the autistics, but disabilities entirely, it's good to have that kind of transitory type of program, right? Nobody's not saying that. But there are individuals who will get in your face and say that my child cannot work in that type of field, period. Point blank, it's never going to happen. And why do they say this? Because that's what they're conditioned to think out here. That there's no way that my disabled ass can go out there and work in the community and be able to be successful and be able to cover my own bills. Which is why I have particular joy in proving them wrong. In fact, everything they've told me that I couldn't do, I've done. With a smile and 2 middle fingers in the air, right? Oh, don't get me wrong. My mom was doing the same thing. But let's move on here. What is being missed in this conversation is that men and women with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, the most significantly challenged, do not fit the current model, said Kit Brewer, legislative chair for the Missouri Association of Sheltered Workshops. See, I told you. I told you. This is what they do. Most of the people out here really don't like the status quo being changed on them. They really don't like when my group in particular come out and then aren't actually able to go out in the workforce because we have a tendency to prove them wrong. They don't like that. Believe me, they don't like that at all. They keep pushing this idea that without the constant supports that they have at the sheltered workshops, that these kids will fail. But since we've been slowly closing the workshops and integrating these guys into actual employment, that hasn't really been the story. But let's move on here, shall we? Although many on both sides of the debate insist that shelter workshops and community employment services do not need to be mutually exclusive, thank you, Brewer said in reality the conflict can result in fewer resources overall. This is what I'm talking about, folks. This is what I'm talking about. It's these people who continue to insist that we are incapable of ever doing anything, that we can never truly evolve, that we must be grateful. Hear me. Grateful that these workshops are here, even if they don't pay us a living wage, because who else would take us? That normal people will not hire us because we're disabled and our needs are too great, and that employers just can't afford it. They need the able bodied efficiency. But when you're performing at the same job level as your typical high school student, and you're still not getting paid what that high school student is, I'm sorry, Karen, but I have a problem with that. But let's move on. But they think, but you're going to lose those resources. You don't have those supports inside your job that can help you if something goes wrong. It's not true, Karen. It's actually not true. This is why full disclosure, as much as a double-edged sword as it is so important, because federal law states when full disclosure has been done that under the ADA and the Disability Bill of Rights that you have to be met with reasonable accommodations. But let's read this here. If you close down the shelter workshops, just to be direct, then what other is the other option? I think it's an unfortunate loss to take that away. Here we go again. This is the idea, folks. This is the concept. It's the belief that if you take the sheltered workshops away, no one is going to hire us. Why is that, Karen? Why is that? When I talk about we live in a world of systemic ableism, this is what I'm talking about. A good majority of people believe that we're just not capable of doing ordinary jobs at the same level as able-bodied people are. That us who have gone and proved that it's possible are the exceptions, not the rule. But I call bullshit because I've seen it. My friend Renee, the one who is not necessarily the most verbal girl in the world, has been working the same job now for over 10 years. She does not go to the sheltered workshop. She still has that job. She has obviously not in any way made her boss feel as though she did not have the same level of productivity as her able-bodied peers, or else she wouldn't be working there. This is the idea behind these people, though. They live in the past. They still live and haunt us with those old ideas of disabled people that we must be sheltered. We must be protected. We can't go out there and live like everybody else. It's infantilization, folks. Infantilization. And it's everywhere. Matter of fact, I to this day, as a woman pushing 40, who have proved myself time and time and time and time again to beat every single expectation they ever had for me with flying colors. And I'm still treated like I'm 6. They treat us like we're children, folks, that we could never provide and do for ourselves. It's this whole idea, folks. It's stupid. Because we have proven, and we have the statistics and the data to back it up, that when reasonable accommodations, proper assistive devices, and things are put in place, We absolutely can do these things. But let's keep moving on, shall we? To Petrie, the decision to leave the workshop opened up his world. He has new friends and is confident in his abilities. People with disabilities think they can't do it, but they can, Petrie said. If they put their minds to it and they have the right mindset, they can do anything they want. What's more, his significantly larger paychecks granted him a new level of independence. One of his proudest moments, taking his parents out to eat his treat. It was amazing. It made me feel like I was a person like anybody else in this world. Thank you. At least 12 states now ban sub-minimum wages for employees with disabilities, and at the federal level, lawmakers face a mounting pressure to do away with the practice altogether. Yet in Missouri, shelter workshops are fiercely supported. The state ranks second in the country for operational workshops. Last summer, state lawmakers passed legislation to safeguard the right to pay disabled employees sub-minimum wages in case the law is repealed at the federal level. Think about that, folks. If you wonder why I hate this state, wonder no more. This state has representatives fighting to continue to pay us sub-minimum wage, defending their right to have us live beneath the poverty line. Think about that. And this month, the state received an application to open a new workshop near Sedalia to fill the void left when CHS closed its program. The challenges of leaving sheltered workshops. Supporters of sheltered employment often argue that the workshops aren't just about paychecks, but the sense of community that they provide. But I raise you, Karen. That's any job. Any job out there in the real world provides a sense of community. Go work for a call center sometime. It's cliques just like high school. I shit you not. Sheltered workshop managers sometimes host social activities such as bowling alley trips or pizza parties that may offer the only opportunity for disabled adults to befriend one another. Here we go again. As a person who's worked sales positions, parents, allow me to tell you, we too host social events. We too have funs and games and extracurricular activities outside of work, including one time when I worked for a job in which we all went out to Hammond's Field out here and caught a baseball game. Yeah. All these same things can be provided by regular employment. Matter of fact, we have regular competitions with my job, especially during Black Friday. I know because I won one of those competitions, I'm glad to say. And that is how I managed to get a 65 freaking inch monstrosity of a new TV that was so big that I actually had to have Paul take it in his back room because I have no space out for it out here. All those things can be provided within the bounds of traditional community employment. But these folks aren't ready to have that conversation. But let's read on here. In addition, many disabled employees and their parents or guardians worry that if a worker begins to make more money, it will disqualify them from receiving federal disability benefits. This is what I'm talking about here. This is the fear tactics that I speak about constantly when it comes to things like this, because I lived with it. Where if I made over a certain amount, that my state would wipe my bank account out. How they threatened that I was going to lose Medicaid, lose Social Security. They didn't know what to do when I looked them in the eye and said, good. That's what I'm going for. They didn't know how to handle that. But let's move on here. Thing is, a lot of us disabled people are tired of living beneath the poverty line. Matter of fact, Medicaid only covers the bare minimum, folks. The bare minimum. When it comes to things like dentistry, for example, particularly those of us with bad teeth that really need some work done, well, if your doctor does not accept Medicaid, and a good majority of the dentists didn't in the early 2000s, you're SOL. However, your basic, normal, even fast food job with decent insurance, if you're working full time, you get access to that. They try to scare you that you're going to lose everything in order to keep us beneath the poverty line. And that's no way to live. As a person who's done it, it is no way to live. Worried about if I make over a certain amount, I'm going to end up on the street anyways. It's not fun, folks. I do not recommend it. When it comes to managing benefit payments, Anderson said that the biggest hurdle was convincing people to challenge their longtime fears that bigger paychecks will mean less take-home money overall. Thank you. When you've grown up your whole life with people telling you you have to hang on to your benefits, working 40 hours a week is very, very scary, Anderson said. CHS offers benefit planning services to show participants how much money they can earn before their income affects their disability checks, as well as how to manage their spending if and when they reach that point. She said in nearly every case CHS has taken on, the employee took home more money from a full-time job than they did with their disability payments. I could tell you the difference. Allow me to elaborate for you. Circa 2004 to 2008, I was making $675 a month. That was it. That was it. We are now in 2023. I am making over $2,000 a month. That's just my basic pay. That's not counting my commission that I pull in on top of that. Yeah. Not only that, but with my job, I also own a chunk of the company. And I have a 401k as well as a chunk of the company. I have far better insurance. Whoa, way better insurance. Yeah, just saying. But let's move on, shall we? No, I actually want to elaborate on this. I want you to imagine the difference in life quality, in overall life quality. From going to only earning $675 a month in Section 8 housing, on food stamps, to earning over $2,000 a month and living in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. And still having decent enough insurance that I can go get my eyeballs checked and my teeth taken care of without having a panic attack over the money. You want to talk about quality of life. It's night and day, folks. Literally night and day. Now, granted, I'm still on that money barely breaking even, true, but I never broke even on disability. That I can tell you. The socialization aspect is trickier. Not so much, actually, but we'll get into that in a minute. Anderson acknowledged she misses the days when she could walk to the shelter workshop and visit with a big group of people, a feeling several former shelter employees also expressed to the Beacon. But you can do those same things in the community too. Having work call centers. We all gather, particularly around the cafeterias, especially on Nacho Day. I made a great deal of friends. Matter of fact, my most long lasting friends outside of friends I met in high school all came from full time employment. Just saying. My roomie back there, one of my best friends on the planet back there. Met him full time, regular employment. Met Sid that way. Met Megan, Des. Oh, let's not mention the folks that my two friends that got me introduced to the whole case in the first place, who acted as extras and stunt doubles in the first Pirates movie, Rochelle and Jackson. Just saying. But she and David Kramer, the current executive director of CHS, challenged the premise that disabled adults should rely on their places of employment for socialization. There's a community perception that socialization is absolutely necessary, and I'm not going to disagree with them, Kramer said. I just think it's misplaced in employment. Thank you. First of all, you do get the socialization. The number two, socialization is kind of on you. Granted, I kind of keep it bare minimum these days, but yeah, there's reasons behind that. And I get my fair share. Instead, he said it's time for disabled adults to integrate into non disabled social settings the same way they are moving to the community jobs. Changing attitudes about sheltered workshops. The legal right to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage is as old as the federal minimum wage law itself. First passed in 1938, it was originally intended to provide employment options for disabled soldiers until they recuperated and returned to the mainstream workforce. The idea of using sub-minimum wage law to create special workplaces exclusively for people with disabilities didn't take root in Missouri until decades later. With grant funding from the Missouri Developmental Disabilities Council, CHS opened the state's first sheltered workshop in 1966 in Sedalia, and a second facility in Marshall in the 70s. Today, Missouri's 95 sheltered workshop locations are run by 87 nonprofits. The state is second only to Illinois in the state total number of organizations with sub-minimum wage approval. Kansas has 26 sheltered workshop organizations. State officials told the Beacon that while a few workshops have closed down due to budgetary issues, CHS was the first workshop operator to shut its doors while on firm financial footing. CHS executives explained they didn't set out with the intention of closing the workshops or taking a stand about sub-minimum wages. Instead, they said it was the natural result of shift in the way they approached their employees. The idea started in 2015 when a few CHS executives attended a conference about how organizations running sheltered workshops could move toward a model that provides job placement and support. Anderson, CHS's director of employment, said that when she returned from that conference, her team started simply asking each employee what they wanted to do. We allowed the change to be organic, Anderson said during a 2019 presentation on the organization's transformation. She said that once some employees found success, it inspired others to attempt the same. The best marketing that we got was word of mouth from the individuals to the other individuals. According to the group, CHS employed 141 people between its two sheltered workshops when it started this process. By the end, 68 people were successfully employed in the community earning minimum wage or more. Another 41 people started attending activity centers, and the remaining group retired. While the CHS decision to close its sheltered workshops is unusual in Missouri, it's far from uncommon nationwide. Since 2018, the number of states banning sub-minimum wages for disabled workers has tripled from 4 to 12, and others are considering similar legislation. At the federal level, lawmakers have made several unsuccessful attempts to wipe out the law authorizing the practice. Currently, at least two pending federal bills offer incentives for states to move away from the 84-year-old practice, including President Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. Although the bill wouldn't ban subminimum wages, it provides $300 million in grants to states that vow to discontinue the practice. In addition, at least 21 states have adopted forms of what's commonly referred to as employment first legislation, according to the Association of People Supporting Employment First. Now, this was my baby out here. I'm a member of what they call APSIMO. One of our babies out here was getting the Employment First initiative passed. And folks, it took years. It took 3 years of hard level political schmoozing to finally get the Missouri Employment First initiative passed. I am very, very proud of that legislation. Extremely. You have no idea. None. But yeah, that was you want to talk about get your hands dirty kind of fight. I'm very proud of that. Very proud. But what's weird to me is, in spite of the fact that we did get that passed in the mid 2000s, you still have these workshops holding on, even though they have seen the success rate since then. I mean, the statistics have been just completely out the door, but they still hold on. They still hold on. But let's move on here, shall we? The laws don't ban subminimum wages in shelter workshops. Instead, they require state officials to prioritize placing and supporting individuals with disabilities into integrated jobs before considering options like shelter workshops or day habilitation programs. That's what it was primary out here in Missouri. In fact, it was kind of the only way we could get it to go through, to instead shift the priority and get that to be the main thing. In fact, this is where these transition services that were also part of my brainchild, along with Judavine and some of the others, ARC, that I've worked with, Folk Rehab. This is where all this sprang from, right? That shift in focus away from sheltered workshops, rehabilitation, and social security, and onto true blue transition services that make sense in this world to get ready to go into secondary education or out into the workforce. These are what these programs are for. That was completely why we put them together. But let's move forward here. In Missouri, state legislators have introduced employment first bills every year since at least 2017. None was successful. That's not actually true. I have to walk you back here. Our first employment first initiative wasn't in 2017. That was actually when I was working for the state, and I was also doing conferences with APSIMO and dealing with political freaking hacks from the Stone Ages. And that was circa about around 2010, 2011. We did get certain amounts of the employment first bills pushed through. We just didn't get everything we wanted with them. But it was enough to get the pilot project going with Folk Rehab and ARC. But let's move on here. State Representative Bridget Walsh-Moore, a St. Louis County Democrat, introduced the most recent attempt in 2021. She said that while many of her colleagues supported the idea, she struggled with the misconceptions that promoting competitive employment equates to degenerating the sheltered workshops. I don't see why, if I'm pushing for competitive employment, it's an automatic assault on sheltered workshops. That's not right at all, Walsh-Moore said. That's something we're hoping to bridge the gap on. Employment first legislation would also likely require more robust record keeping on the employment outcomes for disabled adults, something several advocates and government officials told the Beacon is sorely needed. In Missouri, at least 4 different state offices offer some form of employment services for disabled adults, with their own funding streams and reporting requirements, such as ARC. and burl and the Easter seals, and God, the list goes on. Even the more opportunities run through county level boards. The resulting data from each make it difficult to find accurate comparisons showing the state's investment in shelter workshops versus integrated employment services, as well as the number of people served. I've also mentioned that these transition services very poorly funded. Just saying. However, some statistics offer a glimpse into the current state of the shelter workshops in Missouri. According to a September 2021 report from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, the state agency that oversees shelter workshops, about 4,900 people worked in shelter workshops in the prior year, down considerably from the pre-COVID times. The employees make an average of $5.36 per hour. The state's 95 workshop locations reported total funding of more than $216 million for the year. Remember when I told you we're underfunded? Shelter workshops are not, though. Makes you wonder who's benefiting, right? Because it's sure as hell not the employees. That includes nearly $30 billion in a state aid distributes to the workshops. County level government tax dollars and other grants also fund the programs. The largest portion of the workshop budgets come from the goods and services they produce. The state report shows at least 59 employees returned to the shelter workshops from the competitive employment in the last fiscal year. They use that, of course, to say, see, they can't be successful in the real world. I rolled my eyes so hard I could see the back of my skull. This is when I say one size doesn't fit all. I agree with you, Karen, to a point. But when you've been scaring these people their whole lives, what do you think gonna happen? But let's move on here. A new workshop in Collaboration, Missouri. A few weeks ago, DESE officials received an application for a new shelter workshop in Benton County. A report from the department said parents and guardians cited the need for services based on the closing of the Sedalia workshop in the neighboring Pettis County, as well as loss of supported and integrated job opportunities. The application will need to go through several different phases before it's approved, including public hearings in the community. I think we are starting to see that some of the moves to CIE, competitive integrated employment, are leaving some people unable to find that, and communities are reaching back out to the shelter, said Brewer, the legislative chair with the Shelter Workshop Managers Trade Association. Here's my argument. Why are you not funding these other programs? Because I can tell you somebody's worked in the field, and especially for transition age. The job programs that we do have out here are very, very poorly funded. However, the shelter workshops have millions of dollars coming through every year. Maybe part of the failures would be, if you look at this, what are they saying? These other transition services are not available in these communities. So they're going back to the shelter workshops. And why? Because what other options are they being given? You see what my argument is here, right? We as a state have got to start shifting our thinking, because we just pour these dollars, millions of dollars, federal, state, as well as non-for-profit, into these sheltered workshops. So they're going to be, in a lot of these areas, particularly the more rural parts of Missouri, the only options these kids have. And it's bullshit. If we do not shift our thinking and start putting a priority on these transition services, we're going to be stuck living beneath the poverty line for the rest of our lives. And I can tell you, folks, that's no way to live. Because here's the facts. Our parents are going to not be there one day. When that happens, if these kids are still stuck in the sheltered workshops, living on Social Security, living off food stamps, how much socialization and interaction do you think they're going to be getting then out there in the real community? Yeah. Let's move on, though, shall we? It's finish this up here. Kramer of CHS said the issue is more complicated than that, explaining that other services the organization provides for adults with disabilities in Benton County prevent them from also offering employment services due to federal conflict of interest rules. He added that the proposed workshop managers have already been in discussions with CHS to help any future sheltered employees find integrated employment services when they're ready. When they're ready. Boy, have I heard that 10 million times in my life. When you're ready. Who determines when I'm ready? These people who think that people like me need to be behind closed doors in sheltered workshops, isolated from the rest of the community? Because they got a cute look on disability. Just saying. As for the organization's decision to close the workshop, he said his feelings haven't changed. We took a value, we pursued the value, we got competitive and graded employment for as many people as we could. And what we end up with? We don't need a sheltered workshop. Thank you. So it kind of makes it really clear what the debates are. We are up against very old viewpoints of society and the world. And it is an uphill battle from hell, folks. And why people are so aggressive towards people like me is because I stand in the face of everything that they've ever been taught about people with disabilities. So their argument is, what they always fall back on is that you're not like my kid. But here's my argument. I was once. However, the difference is in the mindset of the people who brought me up and the organizations that they helped me get involved in that also had an evolved idea of what living with a disability in this time can be like. We're going to go ahead and close on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do get tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. As always, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. Bye-bye, everyone.